So what I'm going to do in this video is give you the best explanation of Bdnf that I can and explain to you why it's super important. So basically, this is the homeostasis line that we follow, right? As we age, they say our brain stops growing at roughly 25, right? That's some sort of weird number that doesn't really make sense because there's a lot of science that goes into this. After 25, our brain starts to slowly lose its function. Right? And eventually, if we make the wrong choices, it teeters below where we would call the acceptable line for survival, right? Because now we would start developing neurodegenerative diseases. So at its core, Bdnf, we go into some research here for you. So this is a protein in your brain. Now, what this protein does, I'm going to search Bdnf again, is it helps your brain with plasticity. Is one of the main things. So essential for learning and memory. Now, Bdnf is known as miracle grow for your brain. So you can see decreased levels are associated with neurodegenerative diseases, neuron loss. So this is where you are literally losing neurons in your brain. So there's going to be a bunch of other studies behind Bdnf, but I'm going to show you some cool ways that you can optimize Bdnf in your brain. And one of the really important things to pay attention to is your hippocampus. That's the memory and learning center. That's where, the more we eat, which is called the bigger the belly, smaller the brain. This is some other neuroscience research that's pretty nice, but researchers measuring, body fat index and hip to weight ratio. So it's no longer BMI, it's hip to weight ratio because that's what's really making us understand brain health. So people with higher hip-to-weight ratios both had lower brain volume. And you're more than welcome to go look into all of the research for that stuff there as well. But your belly fat is just really inflammatory. So what's happening, there's two different types of societal ways to live, right? And then you can ask yourself, does fasting increase Bdnf, right? And it'll say, for example, intermittent fasting increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Right, that's one thing that you can increase Bdnf with. Does exercise. Vigorous exercise increases Bdnf. You can see right here, and this helps alleviate depression and anxiety. So when people tell you depression and anxiety is able to be beaten naturally, this is one of the factors that go into it. So now, since we have fasting, the belly, exercise, you can look at life and see where people are. Some people wake up in the morning and don't exercise. That puts them in this. They eat as well. That puts them further down in the not brain grow. And now what you're going to be able to take away from this is something called IGF-1. Okay, this is your insulin, F-1. Okay, that's body grow, brain slow. That's your insulin in the morning. So what would happen there is when you would consume foods and not exercise, you would spike your insulin, which is going to allow your belly to grow, right? So this would be your belly. That's belly growth, right, in the morning. So the biggest takeaway for Bdnf is this. When you wake up in the morning and you don't eat, your brain's going to go into a heightened environment. When you exercise, it's going to go into a more heightened environment. And then if you stay and maintain health, you're going to allow your brain to be healthy and never go below this line. That's the most important part. If you wake up in the morning and you eat food, you're pushing your brain in an environment where it doesn't need to grow. Think about the evolutionary aspects of what it means to be a human, right? If it was my job to figure out how to get to food over here, object A, and I couldn't find it out this day, I had to become smarter to figure it out, and smarter until I found a way around it. And that's how we work as human beings. If you choose to eat the healthy foods, which we're going to talk about everything else in some other modules on this page, it's going to help you. So now, this is the way you look at it in simplified version. Okay, you can look at tons of research, you can learn all about this, you can learn all about your reductions in body weight, you can learn about the transportation of this. None of this is the super, super useful part. Most of this is just extra information. There's going to be glycolysis. There's going to be a couple other things that are talked about here. But the biggest takeaway from all of this, you can look down here and see this talks about oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is bad. But the biggest things that you're looking at on here is what it plays a role in. So like, look, there's type 2 diabetes, okay? So type 2 diabetics, they're going to have lower levels of BDNF. This is how it works across the board. So then, but the biggest thing to look at is that right here. So a better understanding of the role as this in the diseases paved the way to exploit BDNF as a novel therapeutic agent for neurodegenerative and metabolic diseases. Okay, we need to pay attention to our BDNF levels. And what they did was a study. So BDNF, meta-analysis study. So there's going to be tons of random things on here, how to increase BDNF, like 10 different ways. These are going to be coffee companies. They're going to tell you about, using coffee and the BDNF gene itself, like, mutations, a lot of stuff that's just not, it's useful, but Val66 MET carriers experience more skill, so that's where it's a little bit ridiculous. But what we're going to look at here is a simplified version of it. Go back to this and solve the problem right here. So what you would essentially do is wake up, don't eat, let your glycogen deplete, which allows you to have a bigger push with the fasting because that helps your BDNF levels. Then we would also exercise, which also helps our BDNF levels. Now, you don't have to exercise then. You can always exercise before you eat. And what that does is something extremely important, all right? Now, when you are going through your normal day, okay, you have your glycogen stores. You fast, you drop below the growing stage. Now you're in the brain health stage. So you're going to be down here. And then when you exercise, you drop even lower. Right? So now when you eat your sugars, your blood sugar isn't going to spike as much as it normally would. And that's the important part. So this would be your fasting over here. This would be your exercise here. What that's doing is taking your cell from in the morning, when it wakes up like this, your cell now looks like this. So it can absorb even more sugars faster. And that's not going to cause a cell to lock itself up and spill over extra body fat. So BDNF is an extremely important protein in your brain. And you can, I'm not against going and reading through all this random stuff. This is just a lot of reading, like stress, inflammation, exercise, breathing fresh air, getting naked in the sun, you're prioritizing social connections, kind of. It says, there's a lot of weird stuff in some of these other things. That's why I go to research. It says sometimes, no, it's always, intermittent fasting, it will increase it always. That's how it works. It's metabolic flexibility. So what you're looking at here with metabolic flexibility is this, which is a really simple topic that we're going to cover on the last little piece here, and I'll see you on the next training. But metabolic flexibility works like this. You have a cell over here running on ketones, and you have a cell over here running on carbs. So what happens with metabolic flexibility is that you choose based on what you eat. So if you're fasting, what's going to happen is your body's going to no longer run on the carbs and sugars. It's going to transition over to running on the fats. For a lot of people, it's a hard process. The brain may have never run on fats before. You may not be used to utilizing fat as fuel. So there's a lot of things that come into that. But that's what's really happening, and that's why the BDNF levels are going up. So there's a lot of benefits in that. And then fast correctly, eat BDNF foods, polyphenols, yes and no. There's some are proven to increase BDNF, so that'd be like your blueberries. But there's a lot of useful stuff. And coffee, I actually don't even think coffee is really not one of them. Because coffee would mess with your fast, coffee would mess with, a high-protein diet's fine. But yeah, that's just one random resource that I found. And if you want to learn more about BDNF, just type in BDNF and go to NCBI. Type in BDNF and fasting and then NCBI. This is where you're going to be able to learn all of it. And this is where we talk about neurogenesis, right? That's the birth of new brain cells in the hippocampus, right? So you'll see right here, enhanced hippocampus neurogenesis. That is literally this is in rodents right here, but you're more than welcome to look at the human studies. But 3 months intermittent fasting, there is so much benefit behind fasting itself. And that's a whole different video. I just wanted to teach you about your brain-derived neurotrophic factor, show you some resources online to where you can start actually getting engaged, and you can take your brain from wherever it is and put it on a super, super quick scale going upward. Because that's how I learned how to read a book today. It's called Synaptic Plasticity. It increases we'll go over that real quick, BDNF and synaptic plasticity. So this is where you learn increasing synaptical plasticity in your brain, which helps you learn more, right? You don't want excitatory neurons and glutamate in your brain. Depression, that's why. All of this is because of depression. The depressed brain is a bad brain. And you can always just continue to look at the research studies. Like I said, overvalue, this is a shortened one, but Bdnf plays a critical role in hippocampus long-term, okay? Long-term enhancement of synaptic plasticity, learning, and memory, okay? Evidence now strongly suggests that deficits in Bdnf signaling contribute to all of these issues, okay? Depression being one of them, right? Trust me on this one, I've been super depressed. So we'll see you in the next bit of learning.